I want to hear about the study on recovery. So after you do a resistance training session, so I'm in Bali right now. That's why if you're watching, you've probably seen I've got this coconut next to me, and like many places across the world, it is the trendy thing. It's the protocol. People do their training. They go straight after training. All the facilities have ice, hot spa, sauna, steam. Typically, what I observe is there's a bit of a rotation that people do. So they'll finish their workout, they'll go and sit in the sauna, jump into ice, maybe go and do steam, sit in the hot spa. Some of that seems to be a social element. Post workout, chat to people, kind of relax, and some of it is clearly coming from a health like optimization perspective. So, tell us about this study and what we can glean from it.
Okay. Well, I think that's a really great point you made, is that when we look at these studies and we're sort of zooming in on an outcome that they're trying to measure and a protocol or an intervention that can lead to an outcome, it doesn't take into account all those things that you just said. The social aspect, just the general feel good, the routine, maybe that's why you showed up to the gym to finish in the sauna with your mates, but then you did the gym session.
Right, it's a reward.
Right. So that actually, there's some nuance there that these studies probably could never control for. It's all of those other factors of being a real human being living your life that these studies can't
Right,
really.
because what if that social element of enjoying the sauna and the ice afterwards is what makes you go to the gym 5 days a week for a year?
Yeah, that's a good point about all of the other factors why people choose to use these contrast therapies. But anyway, let's sort of dig into this study. I won't bore you with the fine details of it, but just the overall sort of message and maybe some takeaways that we can go back and forth on. So what they did is, in this study, they took 30 men, average age 20 years old, and they separated them into 3 recovery modalities. Cold bath for cold bath at 11 degrees Celsius for 11 minutes, and that was up to the neck. A hot bath, where you're sitting up to your waist in 41 degrees for over 25 minutes. So I think a nice warm bath for quite a little while there. And sort of like a control group that was a thermoneutral temperature, so 36 degree water, so like body core temperature, for 25 minutes. So they wanted to see which of these recovery modalities would influence certain outcomes that they were measuring. So they were measuring peak torque, which is like a rotational force, EMG, rate of force development, and pain threshold, right? So they put these subjects through a workout that was designed to stimulate exercise-induced muscle damage, to create some soreness, to really break down some soft tissue, to see which modality would help them recover the fastest when they measured all these different outcomes. So when you go into the results of the study, when it comes to peak torque, so this was, by the way, on a leg extension machine, and I can tell you what the protocol was. So they did 7 sets of 10 reps of leg extension, right, for the quads. And the idea was, it's a lot of volume. It's a lot of volume. And the idea there is that the volume creates a degree of muscle damage that should create some soreness in which they need to recover from. And what they did is 30 minutes after the workout, they put them either in the cold bath, the hot bath, or the thermoneutral bath. And they tested them at baseline, 24 hours later, and then 48 hours later.
And just remind me, how much time were they in the cold bath for?
11 minutes at 11 degrees. But 11 degrees Celsius, for a lot of people, is not that cold, which is why you need longer duration in the bath. So if it was, for example, let's say it was a 4-degree bath, you probably only need 3 or 4 minutes max. And that's actually another point. A lot of the ice bathing that people are doing is typically a lot colder than that. So I don't know if the validity of this study can apply to people who are doing a 3-degree bath, right? So we've really got to stay in the lane of what they were looking at in this study. So when we look at the results, so when it comes to peak torque, the good news is for people, if you like doing the contrast therapy after your workout, both the hot and cold bath outperformed the control group, right? So they were able to produce more force than the control group 24 hours and 48 hours later, right? So regardless of whether you love the heat or the cold, you're probably going to get some benefit.
I wonder if that's a placebo thing, because you just know that you've done something that was in some way challenging or different to just a kind of neutral temperature bath.
Well, I think that's why they had the thermoneutral control group because they still did something, but they didn't know, like for example, that 36-degree, whatever it was, whether they were sitting in a bath or just in a hot room, they still see that as a potential intervention that may, cause some muscle soreness to go away or.
Yeah, I think just exposing yourself to heat or to cold, away from just like a normal lukewarm temperature, there could be a psychological component where you're like, okay, I can feel this, and this might be aiding my recovery.
Right, absolutely. There definitely could be some of that. When it came to the rate of force development, so it was basically they did a leg extension machine in the testing, right? So after they'd done the big workout, and they were seeing the rate of development in the later phase of that movement, the hot group attenuated the decrease in rate of force development more than the other groups, right? So the other groups had a drop off in the rate of development. So, and these benefits are seen after 24 hours in the hot group.
So normally after you work out and produce some damage within muscle tissue, the rate of force development goes down. In that exactly. Recovery phase. And what you're saying is the decrease in that was less if you were exposed to the hot therapy.
Correct. But like to double click on that, even after 48 hours, the cold and control group still had a significant decrease in the rate of force development, whilst the hot group had recovered basically to baseline after 24 hours. So that actually is the major finding of this study, was related to the rate of force development. In fact, the title of the study has that in it. The title is Hot but Not Cold Water Immersion Mitigates the Decline in Rate of Force Development Following Exercise-Induced Muscle Damage.
Can I ask a question on
that? Yeah, sure.
So obviously this is a short-term study. So difficult to know exactly what that means in terms of months or years, but would you hypothesize that outcome there, is that likely to then have an effect on that person's training volume in the coming days, coming week, which would affect muscle size or strength development over time?
So based on that outcome alone, I don't think I could make a call that was like, I couldn't confidently say that yes, that would lead to you to be able to produce more force in the gym, increase your overall volume, and have a hypertrophic or a strength adaptation. I'm not sure. It does, like, it hints that way, but the next finding is where I actually think that potentially this could be the sort of like the game changer, right? So one of the outcomes that they measured was pain threshold, right? So they use a device that protrudes basically not through the skin, but it pushes into the skin, indents the skin into the muscle, and the subjects have to sort of call out like an unbearable pain, like that is unbearable, I can't take anymore. After 48 hours, both the cold and the control group had a lower pain threshold. So they were feeling more pain at like a softer compression of the muscle, right? We've all had DOMs to the point where it's debilitating, where like sitting down on a cushion can hurt, right? So to avoid DOMs is probably a good idea, because if you're so sore that you can't get to the gym frequent enough to accumulate enough volume over a week, if you extrapolate that over years, you have done way less muscle stimulating, tension through the muscle than you could have. Whilst the hot group, after 24 hours, they were basically recovered and had much higher pain threshold after 24 hours. So that's the one where I think, combined with rate of force development, if you have less pain, you don't feel the DOMs, you're going to get into the gym more often, you can actually have better quality workouts.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive to I think a lot of people will think that the cold or ice is, that's what would help with pain. As a kid, we learn, sprain your ankle, put ice on it, kind of thing. So that's very interesting. Somewhat aligned to some of that other research we've spoken about previously, where cold water therapy after doing resistance training causes vasoconstriction and decreases like amino acid nutrient uptake, which could affect recovery. I think you've mentioned before that after you train, you need to get rid of toxic byproducts.
Right, the metabolites that have built up from your workout, you want to clear them and you want to flush new blood in that has healing properties. Yeah, that's a good point. And that sort of research, which I think was, I want to say 2024 or 2023, a paper came out looking at hard outcomes of hypertrophy, how much muscle do people gain when they go to the gym, but then how much of it is attenuated by a cold bath? So those studies were amazing. And I think that made people really like question, should I be jumping in an ice bath after, a big gym session if I really care about building muscle and hypertrophy? But this wasn't looking at those kind of outcomes, because this was just a one-off bout of exercise, measuring sort of more things related to actual performance and pain. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, that's a great point. So the counterintuitive part is most people think you sprain your ankle, we learned at school, was it RICE, the principle, rest, ice, compression? That seems to be moving away from the vasoconstriction to maybe vasodilation is a good idea. So whether it's a hot bath or maybe even a sauna. And I think that actually, if we zoom out, more research is needed here. This is like one study in a body of evidence that is not very big. Like we're still building the scaffolding. This is just one study that's building the scaffolding. We still need way more scaffolding before we can build a big, strong body of evidence. So it's very early days. I'm not saying like throw all your chips on this.
This episode is proudly brought to you by 38 Terra. Try 38 Terra's DMN prebiotic, the science-based daily multivitamin for your gut microbes, a simple and delicious way to take your gut health to the next level. Now back in stock in new and improved packaging for customers living in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Get 10% off your DMN at 38terra.com using the code THEPROOF. That's 38terra.com and use the coupon code THEPROOF for 10% off. And the subject population here is important to consider. So this is after doing resistance training, you're doing non-loaded exercise, so you're not loading the joint. It's not like you're going out and running 30 kilometers and loading your ankles and your knees, or playing tennis or playing basketball. Sports where often you'll hear people say they jump in ice therapy after, let's say they're doing back-to-back marathons. They're using ice, and the anecdote is that ice, helps that basketball player play the next day because it reduces their joint pain. And so I'm not sure we can look at this study and completely throw that anecdote out, because we're talking about a different type of exercise loading and different outcomes.
Right. And I would even say that the nature of the soft tissue damage of, a workout like this that was created to increase sort of like whether the DOMS is related to the fascia or the actual muscle fibers itself, but the soft tissue nature may be different to, as you're saying, hard tissue, bone or cartilage, where there's inflammation. I think they're different. I don't think we can use this across the board in either direction. I just think it's interesting. I think it's a watch this space. I have a feeling that the trend of ice baths, which has exploded, may slightly detour towards more of the heat therapies. I think social media companies are going to be selling hot baths now and saunas and other things, and it may balance out the contrast therapy that people are liking to use.
How do you do it personally? Like, is this a study along with some of those other studies looking at how cold therapy affects like amino acid uptake? Are these studies that actually affect your personal use of cold and hot and around your training?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, I'm leaning on the studies as much as I can. And I think we did that at our retreats. We intentionally didn't throw people in the ice bath after our resistance training, even though it was acute. And in a week, you're not going to cause much attenuation of any potential benefits. But it's just getting used to those principles, right? So for me, I jump in the ocean after a workout where I get the feeling of having that sort of cold therapy, so to speak, but it's not so cold that it's going to absolutely mitigate the gains that I hopefully got from my workout. And I'm also not jumping in the ocean or the ice bath for the reasons that a lot of people are. I don't actually care about the rate of recovery that much. I'm really doing it for the upstairs. Like, I love the challenge, the psychological challenge of proving to myself that I can get into this 3-degree ice bath, even though I don't want to. I can do the hard thing, sit in that space, accept that I'm there, surrender to the experience, and focus on my breath and meditate my way to, like, for example, I posted, I think it was yesterday on my stories, I did a 2-minute ice bath at 3 degrees Celsius, and I got my heart rate down from 145 beats, because I was just in the sauna before, to 40 beats. So I dropped it 100 beats. I brought it literally down. My rest is 37, 36, so basically to my resting heart rate. So for me to know personally that I have the mental power to convince myself that despite being in a bath that could kill me, that I can bring my heart rate down to rest and be so comfortable. That's the tool for me. That's why I do it. Why do you do it?
Any lower, mate, and you might freeze yourself and wake up in the year 2500.
Yeah, seriously. There was a time when I'm like hitting the 39 beats. I'm like, is this safe anymore? I don't know. But do you have a similar experience there? Why do you do it?
Okay, so the way I use it has changed and evolved a little bit. So straight after intense resistance training, I don't get in. But for example, after playing padel, for some reason, I crave getting into cold water. And I think it's just because my core body temperature is so high. And so it helps bring that down. I'm not sure whether that's aiding with recovery or is it actually impairing my recovery. But I tend to use it sort of after more endurance cardio exercise, or if it's like on the day of a resistance training, I wouldn't do it directly after. But I have a question actually, just thinking about that now, which is not specifically related to this study, but I think it's an interesting finding that the warm bath made people kind of less sensitive to pain, or they had a higher pain threshold relative to getting into cold, which could obviously affect someone's ability to train. A couple of days later, they don't feel pain. So this makes me curious, just thinking about, is pain, say in our hamstrings, is that a good indicator as to whether or not we can train? Because over the years, my personal experience here again is that I often talk myself out of training because a muscle group feels sore, right? I can give another example. Played padel 2 days ago. My hamstrings are sore. I haven't been playing for like this intense 3-4 times a week for some months. My hamstrings were pulling up like pretty sore, a lot of DOMS. But I know that if I get into the gym and I warm up today, after I've done a warm up and I do a couple of working sets, my hamstrings actually feel pretty good. So do we sometimes trick ourselves out of getting in and training because we feel like the pain is a sign that we shouldn't and we're just going to do more damage? How do we use pain as a way to kind of affect our training?
It's $1 million question, that. I have a similar experience to you where I used to think pain was a really good indicator of readiness to perform. And I've changed my views a little bit because, as you just said, sometimes a 10-15 minute warm-up, like a really well-planned warm-up, can completely mitigate that pain you're experiencing. And you can go on to have an amazing performance in the gym, like it could be one of the best workouts that you were going to skip, but thanks to a good warm-up, you actually end up having a great workout. So I think knowing the nature of the pain is important. So I would say like the pain you're experiencing from padel is not a intense pain that's caused by a lot of muscle damage compared to like the pain of, let's say you do 5 sets of RDLs with a lot of weight and you are so much DOMS that your brain actually shuts off the neuromuscular pathway a little bit. So your performance will go down. Like there is some, evidence that pain can actually reduce force output. So this comes down to the individual knowing themselves. At what degree is the pain just enough that you can still do a good warm up and get through it? Or is it actually that level of DOMS that will reduce force output? So then the quality of your workout won't be that good anyway.
Is there a minimum time? Like let's just say, for example, you do your heavy RDLs, you got DOMS. The next day, you're not going to go and do heavy RDLs, but let's say you've allowed 48 hours. Is that sufficient time, generally speaking, for most people, based on the intensity the average person works out at, to train that muscle group again?
Yeah, I would say 48 hours is conservative. I would even say 24 hours later, you could probably train the same muscle, depending on what you did. Like strength training athletes, you could literally bench press every single day of the week. If you're not taking those sets to failure and you're not, doing tremendous volume, you could do the same muscle group every day. But if you're doing high volume bench press, you're not going to go do that 24 hours later. I would say 48 hours is more conservative.
It's 2025 and I have made the decision to join Function Health to help monitor and optimize my health. And honestly, after getting set up, I am wondering what took me so long. Function makes it extremely easy to track important biometric information over a lifetime. Information that you can use in real time to make important health decisions. Function gives you over 100 lab tests covering your entire body every year. Heart, hormones, liver, kidneys, thyroid, metabolic health, heavy metals, autoimmunity, nutrients, and more. 5 times more testing than your typical physical for $499 a year. A lot cheaper than if you were to order all of these tests individually. That's if you can order them. Take ApoB and LP(a), for example, 2 very important tests for determining your risk of having a heart attack or stroke. Yet, as outlined in multiple episodes on this show by Dr. Thomas Dayspring, they can be incredibly difficult to order with your local doctor. Using Function is very straightforward. You join and then visit one of their 2,000 US lab locations. I went to one here in LA where I live. It's very easy, and boom, your results are tracked over time in one secure place. No shady upselling, no gimmicks, just your results beautifully presented and science-based insights from doctors to help you optimize your health. Skip the 400,000 person waitlist today at functionhealth.com/Simon Hill and join me on the path to nerd level health optimization. That's functionhealth.com/Simon Hill.